last week, NBC News released a terrifying, albeit completely believable report about how Donald Trump wants to increase the United States nuclear arsenal tenfold. Now, almost immediately after this story was released, Donald Trump took to Twitter to condemn the story's authenticity, saying, quote, "Fake NBC News made up a story that I wanted a tenfold increase on our U.S. nuclear arsenal. Pure fiction made up to demean NBC equals CNN." And additionally, during a meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he also said this about the story.
No, I never discussed increasing it. I want it in perfect shape. That was just fake news by NBC, which gives a lot of fake news lately. No, I never discussed. I think somebody said I want 10 times the nuclear weapons that we have right now. Right now we have so many nuclear weapons. I want them in perfect condition, perfect shape. That's the only thing I've ever discussed.
He's such an idiot. Now, challenging the credibility of this story is one thing, and let's be clear, I don't believe that this story is fiction. I believe that NBC News was accurate in their reporting, and Donald Trump just doesn't like that the details got out. However, Donald Trump took it to an entirely new level on Twitter when he tweeted out, with all of the fake news coming out of NBC and the networks, at what point is it appropriate to challenge their license? Bad for the country. Now, this is authoritarianism 101. And for a sitting president to challenge the First Amendment in such a public way and really to attack freedom of the press, this should terrify everyone, including Donald Trump's own supporters, because when I saw this tweet, it actually sent chills down my spine. That's how scary I found it, because it shows just how bad of a situation we're in politically. Now, Donald Trump thankfully doesn't have the power to do that. In fact, the FCC doesn't even technically have the power to do that. Still, this type of comment from the president warrants a response from the FCC, which is an agency that oversees the regulation of news media. But up until this point, FCC Chairman Ajit Pai has been conspicuously silent on Donald Trump's tweet. Now, he finally did speak out, and I'll tell you what he said, but first of all, I want to explain why it took him so long to speak out on this particular issue, something he should have addressed immediately. So, Margaret Harding McGill of Politico reports, FCC Chairman Ajit Pai is facing increasing pressure to distance himself from President Donald Trump's threats against NBC, a course of action that would risk provoking the president's Twitter-fueled wrath. Pai could confront public questions about the issue as soon as Tuesday at a telecom law event in Washington, forcing him to choose between his long-standing defense of freedom of speech and the man who made him chairman. If Pai weighs in, he risks repeating the pattern of another Trump appointee whose words and actions have drawn the president's ire and imperiled their positions in the government, such as National Economic Council Director Gary Cohn, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. The FCC oversees licenses for individual TV stations, not networks like NBC, and telecom experts say it's highly unlikely the agency would follow through on Trump's threat. But Democrats are demanding Pai take a stand and pledge he will not judge broadcasters based on the president's approval of their news coverage. Now, during his tenure on the FCC, he's always claimed to be on the side of less government regulation, but to come out on the side of less government regulation in this instance and to come out against Trump means he has to come out against Donald Trump, who's the very person who made him the FCC commissioner, or no, the FCC chairman, excuse me, and who was enabling him to attack net neutrality. So Ajit Pai, I mean, he did release a statement, but he didn't want to release a statement because either way he was screwed. So the problem is that he could have issued a cautious statement and faced criticism for not saying enough, or take a bolder stand, which might require him to recuse himself if the FCC ends up reviewing a license issue connected to Trump's tweets. And if Donald Trump doesn't like what he says, Trump could demote Pai to commissioner and elevate another FCC Republican, Michael O'Reilly or Brendan Carr, to chairman. Now, even though Donald Trump's tweet scared the shit out of me here, and it should really scare everyone who cares about the legitimacy of our democracy, I still like this component of the story because it puts Ajit Pai in a really difficult situation. On one hand, if he comes out against Donald Trump, then he risks losing his job, which would cripple his ability to pursue his corporate agenda. But if he doesn't come out against Donald Trump, then obviously he's a hypocrite, because after claiming that he's against government regulation and, government overreach here, well, what would be a bigger overreach than allowing the president to attack and revoke the licenses of news organizations who post stories that he doesn't agree with or doesn't like? So he did release a statement, and surprisingly, he came out against Donald Trump, saying, "I believe in the First Amendment. The FCC under my leadership will stand for the First Amendment," Pai said in response to a question about calls from Trump to revoke the license of broadcasters who, according to the president, broadcast fake news. Under the law, the FCC does not have the power to revoke license of a broadcast station based on content of a program. Pai, who was appointed by Trump as FCC chairman, said at an AT&T policy event. The FCC chairman also stressed that it is not within the FCC's jurisdiction to handle fake news. So there you have it. Clearly, in taking this stand, this is going to piss off Donald Trump. Donald Trump could just be a petty person like he typically is and really attack Ajit Pai here, and I hope he does that. I really hope he does do that. On one hand, I don't want him attacking freedom of the press, because I think that is crucial for a thriving democracy. You can't have a democracy without a freedom of the press. Even though our press has been extremely corporatized, it's still better than no press at all. But I want Donald Trump to go after Ajit Pai here, because if Ajit Pai doesn't feel as though he has the green light to pursue whatever he wants to from Donald Trump, then this might make him feel less inclined to pursue these really big, sweeping, controversial policies like gutting net neutrality. So, we'll see how this plays out. Most likely, it will have zero impact on net neutrality, but let's cross our fingers here and hope that everyone continues to denounce Donald Trump here, because, attacking the First Amendment and freedom of the press, that's not acceptable. I shouldn't even have to say that. And I know that Donald Trump supporters will go along with what he's saying here because they're sheep. But the freedom of the press, it's considered the fourth branch of government. And it's not literally the fourth branch of government, but it's basically considered one in spirit, at least, because it's supposed to be a check on government power and abuse. And that's what it's doing here. NBC News, in reporting this story, they were reporting on something that I believe is true about Donald Trump. That's totally believable. And Donald Trump doesn't get to shut them down or revoke their license because he doesn't like that they're reporting on something about him. That's not the way that this works. That's not the way that democracies function. And if Donald Trump wants to rule with an iron fist, he'll have to move to another country where authoritarianism is acceptable.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.